maybe I prefer a pin over a necklace, but some whatever that is going to
be. Quote of the show right there. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Basic AF. I am Tom Anderson, and I am joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host, Jeff Battersby. Hello, Jeff.
Tom Anderson. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great, sir. How are you?
Yeah, you look great. I lied. No. I was telling the truth.
I'm working out.
Yeah, I bet you have. I bet you have. You got that cool gym. Why wouldn't you work out? Tom, we've got a guest.
We do.
And we've given this guest short shrift. Should have had him on much sooner than this and more often. We have Riley Hill at SlatePad on whatever platform you're at. Riley, good morning.
Gentlemen, good morning.
Welcome back, sir.
Yeah, we should have had you on a ton more than we've had you on. I don't know what happened, but
you guys are busy. That's what happened.
Well, no. We did you wrong. That's all I can say. We need to get you back on here more often.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. Definitely good to have you. I think Tom, you said earlier that we had Riley on a year ago, basically for the same episode, the WWDC episode of, or the preamble to the WWDC episode. So nice to have you back a year later.
And it wasn't intentional that we have you back for the same thing. It just kind of worked out that way. Yeah, that was back episode 36. And we're up to 62. So don't forget show notes, basicafshow.com/62.
Yes, thank you very much. Good deal. And just a reminder, Random Art and Design and show music is by Psychokinetics and Celsius 7. So we recommend you check them out. Do that at the top. Don't have to do it at the end. Look at it. We did all the business, so we can get down to other business, Tom.
We got a lot to talk about. So we're going to talk a little bit later about the news that came out of Google I.O. this week. Jony Ive is back in the news, doing a little thing with OpenAI that is pretty interesting. So we're going to talk about that. But first, our WWDC preview. So that's coming up 2 weeks from today, as you listen to this, or as the show is released on Monday, May 26th. All online and everything. Keynote is that morning of June 9th. So we thought we would dig into that, talk a little bit, maybe share some things we're hoping for, what's coming, what's not coming, enthusiasm levels, and all of those sorts of things. Because Apple's been getting dinged quite a bit lately for various reasons. So why don't we kind of go through some of the rumors here. Start with iOS and iPad OS. We're up to version 19. And Riley, of the rumors, have any been of particular interest to you?
Well, anytime Apple does a redesign is of definite interest. The fact that we seem to be heading towards what sounds like a unified design language across all of their major platforms is going to be interesting. I'm sure it'll be, everything is divisive these days. I'm sure, like literally everything.
No,
which is fine. But I'm very interested in that to see what they come up with. The rumors suggesting they're gonna kind of start with Vision, that the direction they want Vision Pro, and filter that across the line. But which is I think good. I think Vision OS is nicely designed, and then obviously the iPad productivity rumors are always, we used to get a big iPad release every 2 years, and now they come it take longer to do those. But it sounds like whatever that ends up being, at least they're giving iPad some attention, which is always a positive in my book.
Yeah, what do you think of the idea that we're now going to get a Mac OS like menu bar? What do you think that speaks to?
I'm struggling to see the point with iPad, obviously with iPad OS as it is today. Like, I don't know. Obviously, if an app you're using has keyboard shortcuts, that menu bar with the shortcuts looks like kind of a menu bar. Like, I don't know if they're just surfacing those better, like in Stage Manager or what they're going to do there. But I'm honestly struggling to see the value personally.
Okay. Yeah, it makes me wonder whether or not it's going to swing more towards a macOS like user interface, where we become a tablet in the sense that, Microsoft has a tablet where it's Windows OS, running on something that you can touch. I don't know. It's interesting to me. The only place I really do a lot of work on my iPad is, as I've said several times here, is when I'm doing editing work. I do manual edits on my iPad, and I use it a lot for theater, but that's the extent of it. Otherwise, it's a content consumption platform, watching a basketball game or a baseball game or a movie while I'm cooking dinner or doing something like that. So it'll be interesting to me whether or not that opens up any other opportunities. But you're very different in that regard. You're using this every day. You're recording this podcast on an iPad right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that, it's a good and bad thing on Apple's side, and I think I said this, a year ago or something somewhere in a blog post, but, because all the platforms are tied together, priorities of one platform will kind of inform some of the priorities on the others. And what I mean by that is so obviously this folding iPhone is coming, right? And it makes all the sense in the world that when you open it up, it's probably going to run iPad OS, right? Or an iPad OS interface, right? And so now that, and Stage Manager probably, I think we have a good chance of that. So if that's true, it makes all the sense in the world then for Apple to now prioritize, okay, we should fix Stage Manager. Like if it's going on the iPhone now, our most important product, like those bugs we've been letting sit. Let's, tying your boat to the iPhone is the best way to get your feature prioritized in Apple, I think. So I think that's maybe what's happening here.
Okay. Interesting. It'd be interesting to see for sure. Tom, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was just looking at one of the conceptual things that was posted on a 9-to-5 Mac posting. Someone came up with it. It might just be AI generated. Who knows?
No.
Because you don't know these. Because what's interesting is looking at it, they have an iPhone plugged into an iPad that's running Stage Manager. So the link's in the show notes if you guys want to look at that fine piece of art.
I've seen that.
So, I was thinking about this, probably the last couple of months that, 'cause sometimes I'll set like a timer on the iPad because for whatever reason, like I'm in bed, I'm doing something, and then it's like, oh, I need to remember to do whatever. And so I just use a timer. So I do that. But I was thinking it'd be nice to have that timer just counting down up in the menu bar rather than having to find it a different way. And I'm curious too, like if they make some decent changes to Stage Manager, that might help with the user knowing what application they're in, kind of like they do on the Mac, right? So when you switch from Safari to Messages, the whole menus change, but it also tells you what the frontmost application is up there in the menu bar. So that could be interesting. Maybe pull some of that stuff that's buried in one of those 15 Control Center pages, put that up there. And I think, Jeff, you said too, it seems to be this inevitable march towards, the Mac and this kind of coming together in some ways. I don't know that there'll ever be just one. But also at the same time, it feels like it's taking them 10 years to do something that seemed pretty obvious from the start. And so, and I know that's divisive too, because some people, you want a Mac, buy a Mac. You want an iPad, get an iPad. And I understand all that. And I don't want the iPad to just be a Mac by any means, but I think there's good things on the Mac that as they started to get into Stage Manager and all of these things that were already invented, and I don't know why they felt the need to reinvent it. I still hate that stupid round cursor with a passion. It's like, why did we need that other than it looks cool when it snaps on to a user interface element? And I'm probably in the minority for that, but it looks goofy to me. So we'll see. I mean, I think I'm in favor of it at this point, but we haven't seen it, and we don't even know if it's real. So
Right.
let's not lose sight of that.
I appreciate when they do bring Mac features to the iPad that they at least try to do something different. Because, I mean, this is your opportunity, right? Of like, we don't just have to do things the way we've always done things, on the Mac and Windows. But if those new things don't work, then they shouldn't be afraid to just, to go with the tried and true.
Yeah,
I think that's probably true. I will say one wonderful menu bar idea someone mentioned to me on social media, and unfortunately I can't remember who it was, but the idea that if in Stage Manager or if Apple were to open up the iPad to more long running background tasks, that something in that menu bar, you'd have like a activity monitor like view that would show you the apps that were running background tasks or something, like just a very easy UI so you can see, why is my battery draining so fast? Oh, right, this is exporting something, or this is whatever. So I do love that idea if they were to have some kind of widget of, background tasks or something. That'd be cool.
Yeah, and I'd still like to see them kind of move beyond the 10 hours battery life that's been on the iPad, I think, since the very first one, or at least the iPad 2 or 3, one of those. But it's been stuck there for a while. And when they moved to Apple Silicon, some of the folks who were using, like, trying to be iPad only went back over to the MacBook Air, especially because that gets 15 hours battery. So, I'd like to see them do that, but also take some of those handcuffs off of iPad OS, because, if the MacBook can get 15 to 18 hours of battery life, they should be able to do 10 to 12 on an iPad and take some of those constraints out of the way that frustrate people.
Yeah, and to that end, I will say I have a relatively new iPad. Thank you, Internapper. We're still making that joke after 2 years. And one of the things, so I had that iPad at rehearsal for a show with me, for the entire run of the show. And one of the actors had their son at the rehearsal often, and I would let him, while I didn't need my iPad, I would let him sit and play games with it. And I will tell you that we were having 3-hour rehearsals, and by the end of 3-hour rehearsals, if I did not put that iPad into low power mode, him just playing games on it burned through the battery life in that time. So it's, 10 hours is a dream. It's more like 2.5, if you're being a little kid playing video games. So yeah, I'd like to see something better than that. And I don't know that would be something that would come with, I guess to some extent it could come with an iOS update, but I don't think that's the story. And I meant iPad OS, not iOS.
We know what you meant. It's fine.
Yeah, you did, right. But there, of the 100 people listening, 99 just went, what an idiot.
Well, they will now that you've called it out 6 times.
I called myself out. I just want to point that out. I own my mistakes, Tom Anderson.
I am interested, though, like you said, Riley, on the visual overhaul to see what that looks like, because I do think Vision OS looks really, really nice. And I think some of those glass type things that they've got going on there are interesting. Something that's been very divisive is the round icons.
Ugh.
And so that...
Which Vision OS has, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so some of the mock-ups and stuff, people are conceptualizing, they'll have, circle icons and stuff. And I'm like, well, maybe.
So this isn't real? This is just people conceptualizing that we'll have round icons?
Well, there's been, so Mark Gurman did some writing that hinted to some of this too. And so I think that one could be a thing. But yeah, so once he puts that out and the leakers put their stuff out, and I think John Prosser did some stuff too. They kind of run wild with their concepts. And I'm like, man, I really wonder where these people find all this time to make these concepts. Because some of the videos, man, they're like
really
Apple
good.
quality, like videos. I'm like, holy smokes, these guys must be good. take me 6 months to do that, and it would still not be good. So we'll see what's coming with that. One of the things, I haven't seen anything more on this. I don't know if you guys have or not. There was a rumor that the iPhone was also going to get that stage manager kind of Samsung DeX thing when you plugged it in to monitor. I'd like that, I think.
I'm definitely not against it. I think, again, like if the iPhone runs Stage Manager or just some variant of it, then all of a sudden developers have like real incentive to support it. Versus if it's just, for a while it was just on it is right now, just on the iPad Pro and the iPad Air, right? So it's like not even all iPads, which would be a nice side effect. If this iPhone thing happens and then all the iPads have some Stage Manager, that'd be cool. But I think that'd be nice to have. I do question everyone I know who has a Samsung phone. The more technical people have run into DeX, and it's been like, oh, that's cool, and then they never use it again. So like, I question the real world usage of that feature. We don't really have a way to know, but I just, after years of being an iPad user, I feel like you get this interface, and then the next question is, well, where are my desktop apps? Right? It's like, oh, I've got this, it's great to have floating windows, but where's the Mac version of Photoshop, or where's the Mac version of this or that? And then it's like, the value becomes questionable to some. Not to me, obviously, but to some. So it'd be interesting to see where that goes.
Do either of you use Stage Manager all that much?
I have to on an external. On my iPad, obviously. With an external display, I have to. I used to use it on the Mac, but I stopped because it didn't make any sense. Yep.
Yeah, I've tried using it, and I don't really have an iPad plugged into an external display, so maybe that's the difference. But for me, it's like turn it off immediately. It's not something that I use. I'll be frank, I don't really understand the concept, the whatever the conceit is around that, I don't get. So maybe I need to play with it more to figure that out. But I am not going to spend any time doing that.
I feel like the idea, if this was conceptualized as an iPad feature, and it probably was, the problem I think they were trying to solve was people have too many windows on their desktop and they lose their windows, and we can make that better. And I think that's part of why we have that 4-window limit. That's why I remember the first version, the windows were like moving around people hated that. But I think that's the problem they were trying to solve in quotes. And I don't know. So, obviously that wasn't what people wanted. They changed that. But I think that was the problem to solve. I don't know why they put it on the Mac, because, and I see people, I have a couple colleagues actually using it, and I'm always surprised when I see them using it. And I don't see for the way I use my Mac with like a crap ton of windows everywhere. Like I don't see the value, but some people do.
Yeah, it's funny. I see that too. Like I've got a few coworkers that do it, and I see students do it as I walk around campus, and sometimes wonder to myself if they've just stumbled in, somehow turned it on, and they don't know how to turn it off. But the coworkers that I've talked to, though, they know, and they've left it on because they just like how they can organize things, to go back to what you were saying there, Riley, with being able to keep kind of, this is my collection of chat apps, and this is my browser, and those sorts of things.
To each their own, right? That's fine, I guess. Right.
So one of the things, Tom, you said is in our notes is it just me, or is this the least hyped WWDC that I can recall? And it does feel that way. And not a lot of talk about AI. I mean, there's a little bit, but Apple Intelligence, obviously, in the dark hole of despair at this moment in time. But I am finding, other than the usual hype outside of Apple, there's not a lot that they're teasing that I can see. a reason behind that, do you think? Does that mean that that thing that I sent you earlier, Tom, I didn't send it to you, Riley, but it was video of somebody trying to put an app into a folder on iOS, which is, like a game of cat and mouse 99% of the time. The folder moves out of the way because it thinks you're trying to put which is crazy making to me. Really, really a frustrating UI feature. So I would love if since we're talking about what we hope for in this, I would love if there's some cleanup to some things that really deserve to have been cleaned up eons ago. Something as simple also as, I've been using Forever Notes and I love it. It's become my way of managing notes, which, by the way, is not an app. It's a concept of a way to use tagging to manage your files or your documents in the Notes app. But stupid stuff, which I brought up to Tom a little while ago, is if, say, I'm adding an article that I found in Safari, if I try to tag it, the tag doesn't become a tag. I actually have to put the tag in, then go up and open the note, and then put my cursor behind the tag and add a space, and bang, suddenly it's tagged. So really simple stuff like that would mean a ton to me. Round icons, cute. Okay, I'm down with that. Whatever. But usability features. And I want to point out too, one of the things we do is we complain a lot. At least Tom and I are old men shaking fists at clouds. You might be a young man shaking a fist at the cloud. But we do tend to complain a lot. But one of the things about that is because when we do experience any kind of friction in whatever device it is that we're working on, that's because most of it is frictionless. So when you run into something that's Tom's rolling his eyes, kind of, it's like thinking, what's this guy lying?
No, I was looking up and thinking, but go ahead.
Yeah. We'll let you.
You're sensitive today.
Down to size. I am sensitive, Tom. You're hurting my feelings. Just by looking the wrong way. You looked at me funny, Tom. I feel like kids in the back of my parents' car now.
Don't look at me.
Tom's looking at me. Anyway, all that to say that a lot of times the reason that I get annoyed with things like that is because most of the user experience is pretty solid. And so when you do face something like, like the folder moving out of the way every time you try to drop an app on it, it's like, why isn't this one thing fixed? It should be easier than that. But I would like to see coming out of WWDC across all the OSs, a commitment to, and this used to be the way it was, a commitment to really under the cover work, making sure things worked. Back in the day, Snow Leopard and those kinds of things, those kinds of operating systems, it used to be you got one big upgrade that usually was jacked up in some way. And then the next one, whatever the version of the OS was, really did under the cover work to kind of refine the details, and then you moved into the next one. And I would like to see a return to that in some way. I think now we try to add so much to these operating systems that it drives an attempt to make changes that everybody's going to love without really refining some of the prior OS's changes. And of course that should be being handled in, dot upgrades, but isn't a lot of times. So I'd like to see a return to that. That's my wish for WWDC Christmas.
Not a sermon, just a thought.
Oh, no, right. I could talk for an hour and then it would be a sermon. Give you chapter
and
verse.
I think a lot of that is amplified as well because, you sent that to me from, was it a Threads post, X post, some social.
It was a Threads post, I think.
And so it's, it just gets reinforced as more and more people repost, share that, look, none of this stuff works. When, as you said, most of it actually works really well most of the time. But there are the glaring ones, though, that it's like, maybe just fix this one. That would be great. But,
small detail, right?
And they've got so much going on these days with all of the different operating systems they have. I mean, Mac OS, iOS, iPad OS, Watch OS, Vision OS, HomePod OS, TV OS. And back in the Snow Leopard days, there was Snow Leopard. Maybe was the iPod out? Yeah, I think the iPod was around then. So yeah, it's a lot. And they, they come out with these glasses that are rumored to be coming out next year. So I guess that'll probably just be a fork of Vision OS of some sort. But so yes, they've got a lot. But they're the ones that choose to make them. So they are on the hook to keep them working.
And in theory, I mean, they all share a common core. So, which should make it easier to fix some things. Obviously, the UI layers are all different. But yeah, I've always kind of thought, at least for the iPad, I mean, they obviously feel they can't do this for competitive reasons, but I'd be fine with every 2 years getting an OS update. Like, we're stuck on this yearly update thing because I don't think anyone wants to blink first, right? Google does yearly updates. Apple doesn't want to be the one who doesn't, but that was the thing back in the day with the Mac, right? The updates used to come 18 months, 2 years, something like that. Like, they gave this stuff time to cook, and now they're just moving so fast. It's like there's no time to do some of the things I think they would have otherwise, but they have to try to stay competitive.
Keep that hype going.
Exactly, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and especially now because they've spread it out so much over the year anyway. With much of the big stuff comes, in the .3s, the .4s, later on as it is. So it really is like a year-long release of things, where it's previously like a ton of it just came out in September. And it's probably to their credit, because I can recall some of that stuff when it would come out in September just didn't work at all, and people were mad about that. And now they spread it out, people are mad about that. So, but I think, the yearly thing, Jeff, I think we talked about this show or two back, where it's tough, but people like it. They like to talk about it. They like to get hyped up about it. And I understand it. And I enjoy the events. I'm not going to lie. I think the events are fun. But I do wish they'd go back to live events for the keynote, like Google did theirs live the other day. But they seem to
they should,
content
because I
with
think
the videos.
We talked about that before too. The live events leave no room for, or it leaves room for, you got to have something that really works before you ship it, rather than doing a video that looks cool but it's all concept, not any reality. So there's something to be said for a live event to make those kinds of things.
Google ran into that the other day. I don't know if you guys watched any of that, but in the when they were looking at the glasses with Android XR, they were doing the real-time translation, and they were doing the demo, and it got through 2 exchanges between the users, and then it kind of failed. And the guy was like, well, we told you this was kind of a high-risk demo, and everybody laughed, and they just moved on.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said for that too. It makes it so you have to have something real that you can show people, rather than, made up Apple Intelligence,
new Super Siri
that can read read all your information and schedule an event based upon actual information that's in your that's in your contacts app or whatever it is. I still do have opinions about this, and there's an article that, gosh, I can't remember where it came out. This is totally outside the scope of what we're supposed to be talking about, but who cares? Where I think it was at Anthropic that AI was, they were trying to get it to stop doing something, so it started blackmailing the engineers. Did you hear about that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm gonna post this in the notes. It's kind of interesting. So, my thoughts on that are that as much as there's a lot of AI play going on, and you know me, I'm Mr. AI cynic. They still don't quite, even ChatGPT and OpenAI and Anthropic and Gemini and Grok. All these things are being touted as the next new thing, but there's still a lot going under the covers here that, from what I understand and what I've read, even the engineers don't understand what's going on. There's not to say that there's sentience behind there, but it's enough of a black box that nobody knows what the heck's going on. So when it comes to Apple Intelligence, some of what's going on with Apple, I think is, and I said this, Tom, a while ago when we first started talking about this, is because the results are not as clearly defined as Apple might like. I think the end of what's going on is not as clear, and that's problematic, whereas all the others are willing to talk about it and, shove it out in the open and see what happens. I think, there's still issues behind it. And that may be some of what's going on with Apple Intelligence. But I think they got on the hype train and then put a video out for the hype train. And, the hype train and the real train, two completely different things. So just me, in my opinion. And
I think they were more asleep at the wheel than playing it safe.
Yeah, well, that's fair. I think they got too many things going on.
I think they do. I think Apple needs to figure out what kind of AI company they want to be.
Yes.
I'm a big believer. No one else agrees with me that I don't think every company has to do everything. I get their whole, we have to own our core technologies, but I remember the original iPhone, how it was Apple hardware and Google services, Google Maps powering, all that. I'm not upset that ChatGPT is integrated into iOS right now the way it is, and that rumored Gemini is coming. If they're leaning on partners like that, to me that's fine. I don't need Apple to be an AI company, but I understand that competitively they have to. But are they that company that builds models? Is that what they want to be doing? Because that's what Anthropic and ChatGPT are doing. They're doing that research and stuff, right?
Right. And that's their core business.
Right. Whereas this is more or less a feature to Apple, and so if you can achieve those same features just partnering with someone in a way that the whole Google Android thing doesn't happen again, like the original iPhone, where it's hey, you're our partner. Oh, now you're a competitor. Make a financial deal. And I don't know. It's not the worst thing in the world to me if they went that route.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah,
I totally agree with that. I don't think Apple has to have it built in as much as use maybe what exists and provide an interface to it, which they kind of have done with Apple Intelligence. So it would be interesting to see if that's something that they did. I'd love to see them partner with Anthropic and make that a good backend. I do like Claude for certain things. So
exactly, right. And that's kind of in my AI experience, right? It's not really one chatbot or whatever to rule them all. They're better at different things. You may use ChatGPT for some things, Claude for some things, Copilot for something. That's kind of been how I've been using AI to this point. And so, is it from a PR perspective, Apple being behind in AI is a problem for them, but it's not really been a problem for me. It's not a problem for me until the point that they're if they were to block the ChatGPT app or something on iOS, it's okay, right. Then I have a problem. But everything I do, I can just get in that app and keep it moving,
Yep.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's concern inside the company that if we go down the road 10 years from now, what is going to be the device of choice for people? And will it be an iPhone, or will it be something that has come to market through the AI progressions over the years that all of a sudden the iPhone isn't a big deal anymore? And I think it was Eddie Q even said a couple of well, I read it a few weeks ago. I'm not sure when he said it, but he's like, in 10 years, people may not even need iPhones anymore. And that's kind of what's kind of up in the air. And that kind of leads us into the middle segment that we wanted to talk about with OpenAI and Jony Ive now in a very tight relationship. Jeff, Sir
Very
Jony
tight.
is coming back.
Got his company bought out.
He did, and he'd kind of been kind of off doing his own thing with what was his company, Love From, I think he had, and then he had an AI company, IO. And so this week, word came out that OpenAI was going to pick that outfit up. Jony was going to come on, help with some design work, which brings a lot of interesting thoughts.
Yeah. So one of the thoughts is that the whole reason, or what OpenAI has their eyes on is, being the next Apple. That's and bringing Jony Ive on. I think that's legit. What that device is, or what kind of interface that provides is a fair question. What are you doing? Is it a phone? Maybe. Is it a pair of glasses? I don't know. There's a lot. There are a lot of open questions.
Rumors are that Wall Street Journal says through their reporting, it's neither of those.
Okay, interesting.
All right. Well,
I read somewhere it was like a neck worn, something you wear around your neck.
I saw that too. Yeah, and then I saw something yesterday where someone said, Johnny said, I don't want people to have to wear it around their neck. So I don't know what this is going to be.
A chip embedded in your head.
So I don't know what that's going to be. And so of course there's, people say, well, what's Jony really done of late? I was like, well, what's he had to do of late? He's a legend. What's he have to prove, really?
Right.
And then you could dig into the nuance around that of, well, after Steve passed away, some of the design decisions were very questionable at Apple. Things got too thin. They took away the ports. The keyboard sucked because of the design they wanted to go with, blah, 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 blah. So, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think anytime you put Jony Ive associated with something, there's interest, especially if you've been in the Apple realm or are familiar with the legend of Jony with Apple. Just by nature of that, I'm interested just to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'm sorry, Riley, go.
Go ahead.
No, you.
I was just gonna chime in on what Tom said because I said the same thing on Threads. Basically, that was like I love Jony Ive. I think he's a good designer, but it seems like just yesterday, man, every bad decision, every bad design decision at Apple, it was Jony because of, I was all John. And now he's moving to another company. Oh my God, Apple's cooked because they have John. Jony's the best in the world. It's like, okay, guys. Okay.
Yeah. Remember some people were happy when he left.
Yeah.
And then they've brought the ports back to the MacBook. I almost said PowerBook. Good God. To the MacBook. People were like, see, Jony left and now it's, we're back to function over form. This is great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. People have short memory and attention spans.
Really?
Yeah. So, but
yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Is a change of scenery.
Yeah, and it'll be, I don't know. We'll see what is a standalone AI device, and that's got to be the question that they're asking. What is it? And we talked about this again. We'll go back to what what we talked about with Leah Reich a few episodes back. The idea that are we building things to fulfill an existing need, or are we building things to create a need that you think you have? And those are two very different ends to whatever it is that you're creating. There's two completely different ideas. And I think one is valuable and the other one is possibly commercially viable.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of getting more money. And, then we get into my capitalist rounds. Sorry.
Says the guy that uses all these Apple products.
I do, but to a purpose. You know what I'm saying? It does. They do fill needs for me. the watch maybe notwithstanding, but I really want it for a sleep and exercise device. I don't need a clock. I don't need notifications. I don't need text messages. I don't need any of that stuff. Right. I really have come to that decision. That's not what I need it for, but I would like to track my sleep, and I would like to be able, when I get exercise, to see what's going on there. That's truly the device that I need without stealing my personal information. So there are three things that stand for me, and that would be a need that I have. Maybe I'm unique in that way. I'm very unique. The most unique person in the world. Nobody else has any more uniqueness than I do.
Oh my goodness.
But that's the kind of thing that, if and again, I'm reticent to tie myself to any AI star at this point in time. But if I were going to use an AI device, I would want something that was going to do that, which, by the way, is something else that's rumored coming from Apple, is that there's going to be better health access, better health information. That's one of the things that may come out in WWDC. Those things are valuable to me. I want to make sure that I'm getting steps and that kind of stuff. So AI device, is it going to be the same as I can just, do a search on the web and find the same thing? And again, I do remain concerned about the veracity of and the value of the information that's coming back from these LLMs. It's still, to me, a little dicey. Not that I haven't stated that 1,000 times before.
Well, that's another problem Apple has, that, partially they've kind of dug their own grave here a bit, but, and kind of circling back to that whole live event thing, Google had that translation demo. It failed. Like, I didn't hear about it, but I don't think Apple's afforded that same. Like, remember when I think it was the iPhone X Face ID failed on stage? Like, I saw so many articles about that and how this was going to be like the worst thing ever, and Apple made a mistake. And the same thing, I think, with their health AI, like anything they do with Apple Intelligence or AI associated with it now is going to be scrutinized so much more than anyone else. Like, and we've kind of been conditioned to this point. We know that the generative AI stuff is not perfect. It'll make mistakes. But I just, people are going to be looking at this AI coaching thing with such a fine-tooth comb. Any mistake is going to be like, oh, Apple doesn't, they suck at AI. They don't get it,
Mm-hmm. Well, you said they dug their own grave there a little bit. And I think part of that comes along with that is people have known Siri's been terrible for years and years and years.
What are you talking about, Tom?
They do nothing. And it's like, there's whole subreddits for Siri fails. Jeff and I send stuff back and forth. It's well established, and they just kind of, and it's like, and then they say, oh, here comes the new, more powerful Siri in the video. And then it turns out, well, that was not even ready.
Fake.
And so they've just added even more skepticism to it. It's like, well, this thing has sucked for years. You guys have ignored it. And your, highly touted new thing that you were going to do apparently wasn't working well enough to give a proper demo of. And so they've kind of shot themselves in the foot with this stuff over years and years. And I think, sometimes you wonder, what are they working on there? They've hardware side of things. And I think this has been true for a long time now, that people say hardware team knocks it out of the park, and then the software tends to fall short. And a lot of the iPad, as you know, Riley, being in that a lot, criticisms come from that. It's like the iPad Pro hardware is amazing. And then people complain about running into the issues with iPad OS. And one of the things that drives me nuts with iPad OS, and I use it a lot, is, and it could just be bad programming too, is how the apps throttle. And the other day I opened Canva for the first time on the iPad in a while and did what I needed to do. But every time I would go into the mission control view or whatever it's called on iPad, I can't remember, it would show full screen, like the little welcome thing that I made for the podcast for our show note with guests. it would show that. And I didn't even have that open. But when I went to Canva, it would go back to what I was working on, but it would flash that really quickly. And then like this happens on the iPhone too, like the training app I use 3 times. I'm using it. I switch out to, send somebody a text or something. I go back and it's like the app had totally restarted, which is probably programming, but none of that crap happens on the Mac.
Right.
And that's where the frustrations come in, I think, for me on some of that. It's like, it's a supercomputer in your pocket, but yet it can't keep an app running where I left it. And it's like, it's got all this power. Now, we know they were a little chintzy on the RAM for years because they had to upgrade the RAM for the AI stuff. But some of these things, it just doesn't seem like that should be a thing in 2025.
Yeah.
I'm off my soapbox now. Not a sermon, just a thought from Tom.
But it kind of goes back to what Jeff was saying too about like the hardware team has a very clearly defined like set of they're producing a thing and they know exactly what it's going to be, what it's going to look like, and all of that. Whereas like Siri, they clearly thought it was going to be one thing, and then for years have had no idea what it was going to be. And the software, I guess, falls somewhere in the middle, right? Like some software is easier to do than they know kind of, some features, but like, I think, yeah, there's definitely a spectrum to how they've been approaching just product development the past few years. And we need more clarity on the software and I guess AI side from them. Or they need more clarity rather.
Yeah, and then I think at one point they had different versions of Siri for the different platforms. Like
I think they still do.
They might, yeah,
because it doesn't work the same way on my HomePods as it does on my iPad, as it does on my. I can get the right answer on one device and the wrong answer on another one.
And that's where they ran into problems, is because there were so many different systems.
They should all be accessing the same database.
Right.
There should be no difference between, the back end data that it's, maybe the front end UI is a little different, but the back end should be, I should be able to ask, like, I'll give you an example of this kind of stupidity. I will ask my Apple TV what channel or what app I can watch a basketball game in, and all it will do is give me the scores.
No need to watch.
Yeah, it's like, and I can't select any of them. It's just dumb, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Let me step back and ask you guys a question, and then we have one more thing maybe to hop on, and then we'll close this out because we're already running our usual longer than we need to. What kind of device would you want, OpenAI and Jony Ive to create? What is it that artificial intelligence needs its own standalone device for? Silence. Silence.
There was a story recently of, I guess Apple canceled the Watch with the Camera project, apparently. The Apple Watch with the camera that was it sounded like you were going to point it at things and then it would be ingested into AI or whatever to see what you're seeing. Which I love that idea. I'm sure they tested it and it wasn't really practical to just keep holding your arm out. Like,
FaceTime on a watch would be the same, by the way.
Exactly. I loved the idea of the humane pin. I think something in that direction is appealing. The problem is, there's a lot of problems, obviously. The product no longer exists. There are a lot of problems there, but I think there's something to that approach, and I'd like to see someone iterate on that in a way that kind of solves those issues. I think a standalone AI device has the problem. Like one of the biggest problems with that was that it required its own plan, its own cellular plan on top of your phone. Just to work. There needs to be more offline capabilities. it needs to value if I choose not to pay for that plan. But I don't hate that idea of like a pin, or maybe I prefer a pin over a necklace, but some whatever that thing's going to be, I think there's value there for sure.
Quote of the show right there.
Yeah, I think that's the lead, man. You found it. Tom?
I cannot think of anything. To be honest, I can't. It's like, because I feel like the phone is, at least with technology today, seems to be close to perfect for a form factor. Man, it's got the power to do everything. It's got the cameras so it can see things. I saw they were doing a Gemini demo on the Google AI thing with their Gemini Live. And, the guy was like, hey, help me repair my bike. And so he's working on his bike, and he, it was scripted, but he's, stripped out a screw, and he's like, hey, I strip this out, see what you can find out on ways that I can still make it work. And, and so it was talking to him back and forth, and it's like, well, I found a YouTube video here, take a look at this. And it, plays the video. And so that eventually could move into glasses. They showed a little bit of that with their glasses stuff, but like a separate device that's not one of those, I don't know. Like, where's it going to go? Like, is it a pin? I mean, somebody mentioned, I think I saw on Reddit, Jony said the pin was a terrible product. Doesn't mean it was a terrible idea,
right?
Like the concept. But then again, it's like, I don't want to be talking to something all day either.
Or to have something listening all day either.
Right.
Which, there's that aspect of...
which they already do, but it's...
They, correct, but you have the ability to, leave your... I mean, my watch never gets anything right anyway, so... But you have the ability to leave those things aside if you're using an AI, always on AI device. And by the way, glasses and a battery life, for something like that,
right.
There are issues there as well. Mm-hmm. I don't, it could be a lack of imagination on my part, but I don't see anything right now, that isn't kind of Star Trek-y. Computer, tell me what I'm supposed to do. Well, I don't see a value.
Tom just touched on the biggest problem. It's been the biggest problem since the iPhone came out, right? Is that smartphones exist and they're really good and people like them. Mm-hmm. And so far, people, all these attempts to get rid of the smartphone, which is silly conceptually, have all failed. People don't hate their phones, and our phones are really good. And so maybe, the tech industry obviously doesn't want to face this, but maybe there isn't. Maybe it's just, there is no, they talked about this third core device, that they want to do. Maybe it's only two. Maybe there is no third. And, those two can be different. Obviously, for me, one of them's an iPad, but maybe it's just two devices. Maybe there is no, people don't want a standalone AI device, maybe. We don't know. But it's a very real possibility.
Yeah, I think so.
I, for one, do not.
Your phone can do it all,
That's old news, but I for one, do not. All right, I think we can jump past Google I/O. Otherwise, we're going to be...
Yeah, I think we've touched on the...
Yeah, we've
big things kind of interwoven into our conversation anyway. So,
yeah, Riley, thanks so much for coming on. We missed you. We definitely need to have you on more than once a year, so we're going to do that. I appreciate it. Why don't you tell everybody where we can find you and what you're doing?
Sure. Thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun. I am continuing my YouTube thing. My wife, to mess with me, calls me an influencer. And I'm like, I have a college degree. I'm not an influencer. Don't call me that.
But put that in the show notes, by the way. Riley Hill, influencer, joins us on this episode.
Don't do that.
Shout out to your wife.
Slatepad.org is where you'll find everything. I'm doing a lot more writing these days, but still making YouTube videos. I've got my 1-year iPad Pro review coming up pretty quick here, wrapping up that video. I continue to have, an iPad / post PC device focus. That's my thrust. But yeah, slatepad.org will get you to everything.
Cool. Appreciate that. And again, appreciate having you on. Really, really good. And we'll have you on again soon. Maybe
Definitely
to talk about that
sooner than 1 year.
Heck yes.
My pleasure.
So,
Yeah.
all right.
Always love having you on. So we will do that. Jeff, anything else before we wrap it up?
No, I think I'm good. I have other things I want to talk about, but we don't have time. So we'll jump to that in a subsequent episode.
Right, which we have to talk about separately because our next show is due to come out on the same day as the keynote. So
yeah, we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that. Maybe we'll just take that week off.
We have to bore the listeners with.
Well, they've already left. Once we get to this part, Jeff, you want to take us home? They're like, okay, we're done.
yeah, exactly right. What's next in my queue?
All right. Well, Riley, thanks again, man. We appreciate having you on. And like Jeff said, we'll definitely have you back sooner than 1 year. That was bad on our part. So
thank you.
Just love to get your insights on everything. Jeff, always a pleasure, sir.
Yeah, likewise, Tom. It's good to see you. And we'll talk again soon, as we often do.
All right. And listener, if you are still hanging around, thanks. We love having you here. We know there's lots of places to go for this type of content and grateful that you'd spend some time with us. So we'll talk to you again in a couple of weeks. Until then, have a great rest of your day or your night.
See you.